Hey, what's going on, guys? What's happening? YouTube, you guys have tuned into Rules for Rebels, and I think we're going to title today's video something about remote work, and that the future of remote work is going to be decided this upcoming fall and winter. But kind of the main topic of the video, I saw an article this morning, I believe it was from CNBC, and it was about how GM, General Motors, had recently tried to call all their corporate workers back into the office. They wanted everybody back into the office at least 3 days a week. But it only took a couple of days for kind of employee outrage to cause them to kind of change their tune. And within a couple of days, they walked back that statement. And here's what was kind of funny. They actually said it was a total misunderstanding. Now, if you actually read the email that they sent out, their directive was crystal clear. We want you back into the office this fall. Before the end of the year, all corporate workers are going to be back in the office 3 days a week. So it was crystal clear. There was no room for misunderstanding. But as soon as they saw the employee backlash against this, they quickly walked it back and were like, yeah, maybe next year. We're still trying to figure out what works for you guys and what works for us. And I just thought that was interesting. And so I think this fall is going to be a big determining factor for whether remote work is here to stay or not. That's going to be kind of the main focus of the video, but there's a lot of stuff going on in the world, a lot of pieces of news, and a lot of these things I don't think are worthy of their own video, but I figure maybe we'll shoot the shit for a few minutes at the beginning of this video and kind of talk about some of the stuff going on. Let's see. So for starters, buy now, pay later has exploded. If any of you guys have e-commerce businesses or are involved in the e-commerce space, you probably know what buy now, later is. Companies like Sezzle, Affirm, Afterpay, Klarna, these companies allow somebody, instead of paying for something outright, what they can do is basically real quick little credit application. They get a line of credit and they can pay for their payment over the course of a month, 6 weeks, maybe 2 months, maybe even as long as 3 months. How these things work, there is no interest as long as you make the scheduled payments. So just for example, Sezzle is 4 payments, Affirm and Klarna and some of the others I think go to 6 or 8. But if you're buying something for $100, you pay $25 up front. 2 weeks later, you pay another $25. 2 weeks later, you pay another $25. 2 weeks later, you pay another $25. You were able to buy this item on credit over the course of, again, a month, 6 weeks, 2 months. Doesn't cost you any interest. And hopefully, kind of the goal or why e-commerce businesses are using services like this, it will hopefully up the average cart value. So somebody who wants to buy video games or jewelry or clothes or whatever else, if they don't have all the money to pay for it right now, they can do it over a couple payments. How is this different than a credit card? Well, I guess it's easy. It's an easier line of credit to get. A lot of times young people can't get credit cards or get very low limits on their credit cards. And I think just because the whole process is streamlined, it's become really popular among, Gen Z and kind of young millennials. One interesting thing that we're starting to see is, people have been really going crazy for buy now, pay later. And it turns out a lot of people are now not paying their bills. And so there's, obviously we're hearing about housing bubbles. We're hearing about a lot of people not being able to make car payments. And that might be the next bubble. There's been even though most people don't take out a ton of credit with some of these services, I know Bread's another one. Bread will let you take out 10 or 15 grand. I think Affirm or Afterpay will let you take up to 17 grand. These are unsecured loans and they don't appear on your credit report. So if I wind up maxing out my credit with 4 or 5 different buy now, pay later services, I could potentially get $30,000 to $50,000 in debt, and that's debt that's not going to show up on a credit report. So if I also have a car loan or a home loan or something else, I guess kind of this whole house of cards could come crashing down, and this is a whole nother area of credit that people may start defaulting on. So that's one interesting thing. I actually got to grab my coffee right now, so I'm going to put it on pause and hopefully I don't lose my frame of thought here. Okay, so here's another one. I saw another story the other day that over 50% of, I believe it was Gen Z, I believe this stat was specific to Gen Z, but over 50% of Gen Z workers plan on leaving their job in the next 6 months. It might have even been 3 months. We've heard about the Great Resignation. We know there's labor shortages, and I don't believe this article or this study kind of gave a reason as to why so many Gen Zs were planning on leaving their job, but a lot of Gen Zs were planning on leaving their jobs. One thing that's kind of interesting, and I may wind up making the thumbnail of this video, this little cartoon, or meme that I found online, but it was basically like the evolution of returning to the office. And it was, the first slide was like, I'll never return to the office. And the second one was like, oh, you guys are buying lunches and providing free coffee, like tempting, but no, I'm good. And the next one was like, something else. And then the last one was like, mortgage rates hit 7%, unemployment hit 6%. Okay, I guess I'll go back into the office. And I think if people do wind up returning back to the office, that will be what brings people back. People will be less secure. People will feel less secure about their job security, about their job. And I think people will realize, it might not be bad to be one of the people who's back into the office. It might not be bad for people to see my face. It might not be bad to kind of start building a rapport with some of my managers, upper management, the CEO, whatever. So I think that could ultimately be the thing that finally brings people back into the office. Obviously, getting a ping pong table in the office, buying lunch for people, those things aren't going to work. Maybe paying people more money, but definitely when people are insecure about their job security, I think that's one of the things that may wind up bringing people back into the office. What else do we got going on? So yesterday there was a story about with the Nord Stream 2, the gas pipeline that I believe goes from Russia to Germany, was blown up. Really kind of weird story there. Most Americans, including myself, probably either don't know much about that or have never heard of it. I had heard of it. I don't know a ton about it. I believe it's a natural gas line that runs under the ocean that brings natural gas from Russia to Germany, and it may also hit, Norway, Sweden, Finland, some countries like that. It was blown up. I don't know if it's 100% determined that it was blown up, that it was sabotage. But I guess looking at seismographic charts, they say, it was it wasn't an earthquake. It, appears to be like an explosion, something like 60 pounds of TNT or something like that. So that they're fairly certain that it was an explosion. Obviously, if it was an explosion, it was sabotage. I think the U.S. is trying to say Russia did it. Russia is trying to say the U.S. or some other country did it. Here's what's weird. You guys kind of know I kind of love my conspiracies a little bit. But if Russia didn't have to blow up the pipeline, if Russia is the supplier of the gas, so if Russia didn't want to send gas to Germany or the rest of Europe, they could just say, we're not sending you gas. They didn't need to blow it up. And in some ways, the pipeline being blown up actually kind of takes away some of Russia's bargaining power, because before Russia could have told Germany and other countries in Europe, especially going into winter when they're all going to freeze or pay out their ass for heating their homes, Russia could have said, look, you guys need to back off, stop trying to get Ukraine to join NATO, or, stop providing weapons to Ukraine, stop providing money to Ukraine, and I'll turn the gas back on. Well, now that the pipeline has exploded, that bargaining chip is gone. So Russia has very little reason to do this themselves. One thing that has been reported, it's been reported that Germany was having talks with Russia behind the USA's back. So basically, it was looking like Germany might cave and kind of stop this nobody's going to support Russia thing. The U.S. got upset about that, and maybe we send over some elite divers, a Delta Force, a CIA team, and we decide to blow up the pipeline and then blame it on Russia. Crazier things have happened. I don't know what you want to, if you want to look at 9/11, if you want to look at the Oklahoma City bombing, you want to look at any number of things. The idea that the U.S. wouldn't do something like that, it would be a very naive idea. So, and I think, I don't know if it was the prime minister, somebody high up in the government of Poland came out and said, thank you, USA, the other day. I'm not sure. You would think Poland would want natural gas from Russia, so I'm not sure if this was like kind of a sarcastic, like, oh, thanks a lot, USA, or if he was genuinely thankful. But apparently Poland thinks that the U.S. did this as well, and actually there's a clip surfacing from, I think, just before the war broke out between Ukraine and Russia, or before Russia invaded Ukraine, and Biden was asked by a reporter something about the Nord pipeline, and Biden made some comment to the effect of, well, there won't, if Russia invades Ukraine, if one boot crosses the ground, there won't be a Nord pipeline. And the reporter followed up and said, well, President, how can you say that? This is a pipeline between Germany and Russia. Like, you don't really have a say if it's there. And Biden kind of grinned and was like, there will be no Nord pipeline, wink, wink. So Biden basically already made a threat that if Russia invades Ukraine, the pipeline will go away, and now the pipeline has gone away. So in my mind, the USA has done it. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. Drop a comment down below. I'm trying to think if there's any other news. So I guess YouTube opened up monetization to YouTube Shorts creators. That was kind of a big change. A lot of people were excited. It was being reported that YouTube was actually going to lighten the requirements to become a YouTube partner or become monetized. A lot of people thought maybe the 4,000 hours of watch time would be knocked down to 2,000 hours of watch time, or the how many subscribers do you need? 1,000 subscribers might be knocked down to 500. Turned out that isn't what happened. What actually did happen is now Shorts creators, as opposed to just getting this short slush fund that YouTube created, Shorts will be getting advertising in the near future. And the advertising will obviously pay creators. They can get into the YouTube monetization program. But I believe you need 10 million views over the course of 90 days. Now, obviously, views on YouTube Shorts come a lot easier because, YouTube Shorts is kind of like TikTok. You just watch one video after another, and so you're getting an impression whether somebody wants to watch your video or not, just somebody naturally flipping through Shorts. The problem is this winds up working out to something like 110,000 views per day, and even though Shorts tend to do better view-wise than long-form videos, just kind of due to the nature of Shorts, that's a whole fucking lot of views. So I think a lot of people were expecting that monetization may have gotten easier for creators. Turns out that's not the case. And then one more story, I guess, kind of before we get into what this video is actually about. And I kind of like this format. Let me know what you guys think about this. There's a lot of topics that I find interesting. I want to give my take on. I want to share with you. I want to hear from you guys about. But a lot of these topics I don't think necessarily warrant an entire video unless it were a short. Let me know if you guys would like to see shorts. Something I thought about doing, but I don't really love the shorts format. Anyhow, I kind of like this format where we can just kind of lightning round, where we can just kind of hit different stories before maybe getting into one kind of main core story of the video. But I saw the sales of NFTs has fallen off by about 97%. That's pretty astounding. I saw another article the other day that Anonymous, the hacker group who releases those weird videos wearing the scream faces or whatever that is. Anonymous had addressed the Bored Ape Yacht Club. I don't know if they are accusing them of fraud or what that was all about. I didn't really follow up on the story, but I did see that headline yesterday. But let's get back into NFT sales have fallen off 97%. So obviously crypto is suffering. NFTs are even more speculative and even less useful than actual crypto. So it's not really surprising that NFT sales are falling off. What I think it does show, I think the entire collectibles market has been in a bubble for quite some time. We're not just talking NFTs, we're talking sports cards and, sports cars, exotic cars as well. I think this entire space has been in a bubble for the past 2 or 3 years. And one thing that I'd heard, and I believe myself, I kind of buy into, is the idea that this inflation that we've been seeing for the past few months or the past year, this isn't new. This has been going on for quite some time. When you saw, obviously COVID caused a short-term crash in the stock market, but things recovered quickly and was actually hitting new all-time highs even before, even greater than the times before COVID. And it was really weird because the economy was basically shut down. A lot of people weren't working. Nothing was being produced. Nobody was going out. Nobody was really doing anything. And it's kind of weird that, the stock market is hitting all-time highs and, money's flowing at a time when nothing's actually being produced. And so there's, people make the argument that inflation actually started, probably way back at the beginning of COVID, but inflation hit assets and commodities before it hit, consumer staples. So the reason you saw 25% plus gains in the stock market during a time when nothing was happening in the world is because that was inflation, right? That was inflation of the stock market. The reason we saw home prices going up at astronomical values, part of it was remote work caused people to move and buy homes and everything else. Inventory is low, blah, blah, blah. But ultimately, what we were seeing was an inflation on assets before inflation came to consumer staples like food and gas and everything else. I did see the Fed put out a report the other day that basically said 60% of the cause of inflation, at least inflation in homes, is remote work, COVID, and kind of changing people's living and working patterns. Well, I do think that played the role. I think it's very convenient that it's like, hey, it's not our terrible monetary policy that caused this inflation. It's not that we've been printing insane amounts of money for the past 3 years. It's not that we've printed more money in the past 2 years than in all recorded history before. That has nothing to do with the cause of inflation. The cause of inflation is because a lot of you guys moved from the city out to the suburbs, rural areas, vacation towns, smaller towns, and that's what caused all this inflation in the housing market. Doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. But I guess we'll kind of use that as a jumping off point to talk about this GM story. I kind of laid out the story for you guys at the beginning of the video. So General Motors, GM, had called on all corporate workers to return to the office at least 3 days of the week before the end of the year. I think there was some type of fall deadline, probably October, November. They received so much pushback from employees that they walked it back. And rather than admitting, like, look, we wanted to do that, we think there's benefits to working in the office, they basically said, that's not what we said. You guys misunderstood it, even though it was crystal clear what they wanted. That kind of leads me to kind of the thesis of this video, which is I think this fall and this winter is going to be the time that ultimately determines whether remote work is here to stay or whether remote work isn't here to stay. One thing I find interesting about the GM thing, one thing that I've learned from kind of my personal life, my business life, is unless you're going to stick to your guns on an issue, don't come out too strong on that issue. And kind of the best example I can give you is this. Let's say my girlfriend wants to do something that I don't want to do. Maybe she wants to go out to the city and, go to a club with her friends and drag me along. Maybe she wants to go see like a ballet or a play. My girlfriend wants to do something that I don't want to do. Now, I have a couple choices. I can either just say, I'm not going, or I'm not interested in doing that, and I'm an asshole and she's mad at me. I can just say, fine, bite my tongue and go. Or I can whine and bitch and moan and say I'm not going, even though ultimately I wind up caving and going. And why that's kind of the worst route to go is, A, I still wind up having to do whatever this thing is that I don't want to do. And I don't even get any, I don't know what you want to call it, brownie points, credit, thankfulness. I don't get anything for it because if I were to try to tell my girlfriend, like, look, I went to that, ballet with you, we should go to this thing I want to do. Oh, you mean that ballet that you bitched and moaned about for 4 hours, and finally I had to force you to go. So in a situation like that, like, I don't even wind up getting credit, even though I had to do the thing I don't want to do. And I kind of see the GM thing as being kind of the same way, right? So everybody knows that GM wanted to force the workers back into the office. They eventually caved, but the workers still have a sour taste in their mouth about GM. And I'm sure there are some employees out there who are like, look, even though we kind of dodged a bullet this time, they will get us back into the office. That's clearly what they want, and maybe I need to start looking at another job. So they're getting kind of all the negative repercussions of bringing people back into the office without actually accomplishing their goal of bringing people back into the office. What they had kind of said is, you guys did a great job, pivoting to this remote work, format. But we do think that there's some tangible benefits to actually having people in the office, and we feel that a hybrid environment, maybe it doesn't have to be 3 days a week, but we feel like a hybrid environment, there's some benefits to that. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. There's definitely benefits to being remote. People don't have to commute. They don't have to pack lunches. They don't have to waste time. You have happier, healthier employees who will hopefully work harder for you. But there are negatives, right? Like communication isn't as great. Not to say that everybody's a slacker, but if somebody is a slacker, it's a lot easier for them to slack off at home than it is in the office. If any of you guys have ever slacked off at a job, and I would imagine everybody should raise their hands because we all have, there's a point when you're slacking off at work to where, like, slacking off is sometimes more boring or more painful than actually doing the job. And if you're stuck in the office and you have somebody looking over your shoulder, rather than staring at the same Excel screen for 4 hours, which is going to get boring and just be terrible, at some point you'll probably be like, I might as well just do some fucking work because I'm stuck here anyways. However, on the flip side, if you're at home and you don't need to, you're not being monitored by anybody, you don't need to pretend to work, maybe I'll just move my mouse, once every 15 minutes and watch a Netflix show or play some Call of Duty, or maybe I'm not being monitored at all. Maybe I'll just go for a run or something like that. And honestly, you know, if I look at my friends who work from home, I got one buddy who goes for a 2-hour bike ride every afternoon. Me and him kind of have a competition where we use this app that kind of tracks your rides and runs, and we kind of have a weekly competition to see who can put up more miles running and biking. And you know, so I get notifications when he goes for a ride, when he goes for a run. I got another buddy who puts in a couple hours a day playing Call of Duty, and I have a couple friends who are doing the overemployment thing, where they're actually holding down 2 and even 3 jobs. Because, you know, the reality of it is a lot of jobs can be done in well under 40 hours, and if you're not being monitored and you can do a second job and collect 2 paychecks, why not, right? But I think we as a society, you know, I've talked about this a million times before. You guys have probably heard this rant from me, but I think we as a society need to determine, why are we paying people? Well, you know, are we paying people to have their butt in a chair from 9 to 5 and stare at a screen, and we don't really care that much about the task or the result or the productivity? Or are we paying somebody for a specific skill set, a specific end result, a specific goal? In which case you really shouldn't care how they work, where they work, when they work, or how many hours they work, as long as the actual job is getting done. Now, obviously, there's some jobs like, you know, retail. If you have a store that's open from 9 to 9, the store needs to be staffed from 9 to 9. You know, IT help desk, if somebody needs to be available during these hours, somebody needs to be available during these hours. But if it's a data entry job, if it's a marketing job to where it's not like super time sensitive, you know, I always give this example. If you got Billy and Susie both doing the same job, Billy can finish his work in 20 hours, Susie takes 40 hours. What incentive is there for Billy to work harder or work more efficiently? Because it's not like he gets to go home after he completes his work in 20 hours. He's just going to wind up having to pick up some of Susie's work, or he's going to be given some other tasks to do. So the reward for working hard and being efficient is just more work. There is no reward. Whereas if you were allowed to scoot out of the office, you know, maybe you take a small pay cut or something like that, but you earn, you know, half of your free time back. You know, oh wow, I just saw an eagle over there. That's crazy. Anyhow, you guys kind of get the point. We should pay people based on a skill set, a result, an end goal, as opposed to paying somebody for sitting in a chair. And until we kind of make that shift, I don't see remote work becoming common, because, you know, employers, bosses, managers don't know if you're putting in your full 40 hours, and they feel like they're being cheated. Whereas if they were just, you know, here's what I expect from you, Billy, you got it done. You know, I don't really care whether it took you 15 hours or 40 hours to do it. But until we kind of make that mental shift in society and how we value work and how we value employees and why we pay people, I don't think remote work is necessarily going to be here to stay. We've already seen a lot of companies calling people back. I know just from my personal life, I've seen a number of people who they have to be back in the office 1 day, they have to be back in the office 3 days. Percentage-wise, there's a lot less people working remotely now than there was a year ago. But it'll be interesting to see how all of this shakes out. And I think this upcoming fall and winter will be a big determining factor in whether remote work becomes a norm or is here to stay, or whether it doesn't. It's kind of silly. Like I think I talked about this in a recent video. If you haven't returned to the office at this point, what sense is there in returning to the office? Like, you know, Joe Biden, who was Mr. Very serious about COVID. I mean, you know, I just saw a clip the other day from, I think this was last year, but it was being replayed because there's a hurricane going on right now. If you guys remember last summer, there was some hurricane that was going to hit Florida or the Carolinas, and Biden said, the number one thing you can do for hurricane preparation is to get vaccinated. You know, it wasn't stock up water. It wasn't get baby formula for your babies. It wasn't make sure you have batteries and lights or know an exit plan if you have to evacuate. The one thing you can do to prepare for a hurricane is to make sure you're vaccinated. You know, peak clown world. But that's what he said. And Biden, who was super serious about it, has now declared that COVID is over. So, you know, we can't hang on to this, well, we're working remotely temporarily because of COVID. COVID is done. And COVID is done according to Joe Biden, but according to the American people, the average person, you, me, your neighbor, outside of a few outliers on Reddit and Twitter who still think we're all going to die, and that we're very selfish for living our lives. Outside of that, the vast majority of people have been unconcerned, unbothered regarding COVID for quite some time. So it's kind of silly that people are still, or, you know, businesses are kind of still hanging on to this narrative that we're working from home, quote unquote, because of COVID. You know, I remember even, was Lollapalooza last summer or the summer before? But I remember I guess it was probably like July of 2021. Lollapalooza is this giant music festival in Chicago. I believe it's Grant Park, right? Couple 100,000 people. And the backdrop, you know, I guess on one side the backdrop is a lake. On the other side the backdrop is the Chicago skyline and Chicago Loop where all the office buildings are. But it was funny that, you know, people at Lollapalooza could look out and see all these office buildings, which were empty. The office buildings were empty because it was too dangerous to go in the office because of COVID. Yet, you know, 100 yards down the road in a park, you have 400,000 people shoulder to shoulder, face to face, drinking, kissing, screaming, singing, listening to music. You know, I'm not complaining about that. I'm glad the event went on. But there's, you know, so something doesn't make sense. There's kind of two opposite things going on. We have empty offices because of this dangerous pandemic sweeping the country. Yet at the same time, outside, we have hundreds of thousands of people shoulder to shoulder listening to a concert, something that, you know, I think everybody would probably agree is pretty non-essential. So yeah, here we are. I guess we're 25 minutes into this video. We've covered a lot of stuff. I'd love to hear what you guys think about kind of any of the topics we've covered. As far as, you know, remote work goes, are you guys working remotely? If you have a business, have you brought your employees back? Maybe you've been working in office the whole time. As always, would love to hear your thoughts, feelings, experiences, etc. So go ahead and drop a comment down below. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. If you're not subscribed to the channel, click the subscribe button down below, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.